let's get on to Patriot Battery Metals. Been in the definitely the big talking point. So like massive, thick, high grade lithium intersections. It's in Quebec, right next to a lake. It's a very interesting project. JD, they've released an update on the environmental and PFS activities. We've got a lot to go through in this. What's your take on it?
It's a really interesting story. So we're going to just start with a bit of a company overview to sort of set the scene and make sure we're all on the same page. So like you said, the Corvette project is their main asset. This is a hard rock lithium asset in the James Bay region up in Quebec in Canada. So the project sort of sits along 50 kilometres of strike, and they've got various prospects all named CV1 through to 50.
So CV must be Corvette.
Yeah, that's right. So CV5 is the focus, and the company has flagged the ultimate goal of connecting a lot of these prospects, as a lot of them are outcropping, and they think they all are part of the same system. So we'll sort of see how that unfolds. The non-exec chair of this company is Ken Brinson, so familiar to a lot of the Australian investor community, former boss of Pilbara Minerals, and the company's now capped at Canadian $1.6 billion. So they've had a really huge run over the past year. And of course, in December, they listed their CDIs out here in Australia. So,
right, JD, explain what a CDI is for the non-finance folk and me.
It's a CHESS depository interest. Essentially, it means the shareholder in Australia, in this case, has the right to a share in the company. In this case, the main listing is on the TSX, and I think Patriot also have a listing over the counter in America as well.
So you can the value they've got in Australia is 10% of what the total company value is on the ASX.
It doesn't work like that. No, it's the CDI will have an exchange ratio back into it. I think in this case it is a 1-4-10 share, but the number of CDIs on the ASX is not forever equal to 10% of the total issued capital.
Yeah, that's why you'll notice the share price when you compare the price of the Canadian and the Australian stock. It's a dollar something in Australia, and I don't know, 14 or something odd dollars in Canada. So moving on to the operational side of things, they're building an 80-person camp. They're after the authorization to build an all-weather road, as this is an area that can be pretty locked off through winter, and they're moving into a hydrogeological program and really focusing on getting a PFS out by mid-2024. So it really sounds like winter hasn't slowed them down over there. They've got 6 rigs active and they're just churning away. So we're expecting CV5 to have a mineral resource estimate out by this quarter, so over the next couple months. So our eyes are peeled for that one. And on cash in the bank side of things, they raised 50 million Canadian recently. And with a lot of in the money options, they're sitting at roughly $80 million Canadian in the bank. So there's a couple areas that stand out, I think, to all of us that we want to unpack. Firstly is that listing structure, which you sort of touched on there, Maddie. So this is a company that's dual listed, and the stock is really strongly supported in Australia. And I think that speaks to the Australian market understanding lithium assets. So I think a lot of Canadian investors might be scarred by Nemaska, North American Lithium. These are 2 examples of companies that went into bankruptcy. North American Lithium has now been scooped up by Sayona and Piedmont in a joint venture. So
it's just restarted.
Yeah, exactly. Just last week, I think we covered that one. So it really speaks to the Aussie market's familiarity with these sorts of assets. And it's interesting for a company that's primarily listed in Canada. The second bit that really stands out to me is the environmental and social side of things. So if you haven't done so already, jump on their website, and the first thing you'll see is an absolutely gorgeous view with helicopter or drone flying over what they call the outcropping strike of the ore body up in Quebec in the James Bay region. And it's just gorgeous. The company will be pretty quick to flag that there are a lot of other projects in the area. You've got Allchem, Critical Elements, Lithium, like we just said, Sayona also in the area. So I think that really is highlighted by the company very regularly coming out with environmental updates on the social permitting side of things. And I think, Maddie, you had a few more points to touch on there with regards to how it's sort of broken up geographically across Canada and in particularly in Quebec with the different regions, and how that sort of sits with the Inuit communities and how you sort of go about licensing over there.
Yeah, I found this on the net, the native title arrangements. It sounds like they approved a heap of hydro power facilities in history, but didn't properly consult the native title owners.
Who did?
Quebec government.
Yeah.
And they, from this, these become this category 1, 2, 3. So you'll see the thing I've brought up on the screen. So the dark red is category 1, light red is category 2, and then everything else is category 3. So essentially category 1, native title own the land. Category 2, the native title owners, local communities have to be consulted and compensated for things to be developed on that. And category 3 is owned by the government of Quebec, and they can authorise development projects without consulting the nearby communities and landholding corporations. So that green box is where the Corvette project is. So, but you look at that yellow one on the edge, that was our Alchem's James Bay project, which took 5 years to get approval for. So that, you can see that's right on the edge of a category 2. So that, whether that was a reason why it did take a bit longer. So I suppose this thesis is in support of the environmental side being an easy permit. But as you said, that flyover, JD, you look, there's that beautiful lake, and the outcropping pegmatite is right on the bank of it.
It's a good-looking lake that I'd want to protect if I lived nearby it.
Oh, but even just the water, whether the groundwater coming through there, and God, if the bloody one of the high walls burst and let the water in there, like it is right next to this.
So I think the company's going about that the right way. They're doing the hydrogeological testing that speaks to the groundwater issues they might face. They are doing the environmental permitting, the social licensing, as highlighted by the announcement they've come out with. So I think they are going and trying to check all these boxes and doing the right things in terms of getting those approvals, which are really key in this area.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me a little bit of Chalice. You have this, enormous, well, potentially enormous. I'm speculating here. You have what seems to be a pretty substantial discovery, and the market seems to think so by the fact that it's valuing it at 1.6 odd billion Canadian. And Chalice is not dissimilar, because it's a massive discovery, and they're both seemingly in beautiful areas, both in mining jurisdictions. Don't get me wrong, but the actual pathway to turning this from a discovery into a mine is going to be long and complicated, marred by the fact that there's this environmental overlay that's exacerbated because it's beautiful and it's ecological, and there's a whole bunch of biodiversity going on there.
Oh, even though Quebec, if this is a category 3 in Quebec, own it and don't need authorisation, I would assume there's still a risk that there would be a lobbyist of some sort that will come and put their 2 bob in and get in the race. I'll be interested to see if it is as seamless and easy as it appears.
Yeah, I think it's a prime example of what the sort of NIMBY type people will be debating over the coming years, and what we'll be debating over the coming decades, with society's sort of need for all these critical minerals and not wanting to develop the assets. So it's the trade-off as society we've just got to speak about.
They're definitely pro development of these, with the Canada's view on the critical minerals strategy and everything.
I think Canada's an interesting one. It can be really state by state and province by province.
But I think even county by county, like within the province, like depending on the county within the province, I know, especially that's in USA as well, really dependent on the very, very small areas.
And Australia is not too dissimilar. We've got, states such as Victoria, where it's a lot harder to develop an asset in comparison to parts of WA.
Well, you look at the scale of this deposit. So we're getting hits of 131 metres at 1.96%. They've released like these high grade portions of it. So 25 metres at 5% lithium. So, and considering spodumene pegmatites can only be, spodumene can only be 8%. That is as high as the lithium content goes. So 5%, you're heading towards pretty much pure spodumene.
In all fairness, do we know if that's true width? I mean, we haven't seen cross sections.
Exactly. And this is where I was leading to. So we look, they could have just drilled that right through the strike of the ore body for all we know. But there's bugger all cross sections being given out on the announcements, and everyone's probably the scale of how big this is and the grade is probably getting lost. So look, Canaccord, they've put out their estimate for the resource estimate, the back of the envelope. But conceptually was 148 million tonne at 1.14%. Macquarie put out 136 million tonne at 1.13%. So considering Liontown is 140 million tonne at 1.4%. So the grade they're estimating the grade to be considerably lower, which is probably not what the retail investors are actually thinking this stock's going to come out with. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting how that ties into what sort of processing facilities are needed going forward. We've seen the company flag that these high grades lead to higher recoveries, lead to having a DMS circuit that perhaps doesn't require flotation and can potentially be lower cost. We've seen the company in their latest announcement highlight the words low capex, low opex potential project. So
does that seem like a fair representation based on your read, JD?
I mean, just looking into the numbers that various analysts have sort of thrown around, touching on, like you'd said, Matty, before, Macquarie, they're throwing around a number of $800 million of upfront capex. I don't know about you guys. That's not super low cost in my eyes.
That's what Liontown are doing. That's what Liontown's capex is. That's bloody high.
Yeah, and that one's had 4 increases since they came out with that in 2021. So it'll be super interesting. This is, of course, a asset that's not even in resource yet. They haven't had the PFS come out. So any potential capital expenditure would still be years away. And there was another statement that Blair Way, the CEO, said that stood out to me just reading this the other day. To put it into perspective, if I said we have identified 10 million ounces and the grade is about 2 or 3 ounces per tonne, you'd say, shit, that's pretty significant. So
that's come from the CEO of this company on a project that doesn't even have a resource.
Yeah, it's still very early
stage.
You're
not allowed to do that.
Maybe Canada's a bit different to Australia.
Because you're inferring potential resource estimates without having a resource estimate.
Yeah, and in previous shows, you've highlighted, Matty, how difficult it can be to compare gold to lithium assets.
I tried, and I tried to do pure grade conversion and cost conversion, but it wasn't received too well because payabilities are so different and the contracts are so different. The only way you can appear to do it is just purely based on revenue.
Yeah, and I think why he's made this statement is coming back to an issue we touched on earlier, the significant proportion of shareholders that sit in Australia. He has sort of identified the North American market as a market that's familiar with gold and a market that's not so familiar with lithium. And I think he's really tried to put it in perspective for those investors over there to sort of get investor and shareholder buy-in. But yeah, it's obviously not apples for apples comparing the two.
Is that when he said shit, when you said shit in that quote, was that not, did he not say? He said
it was a bit more colourful, but I thought I'd tone it down a little.
So the other word was there, right? That's interesting. I just can't, where they're talking about the high grade, how the processing will be different because it's high grade, it won't need as much processing, but then you've got Macquarie and Canaccord predicting a 1.1 to 1.2% grade, so that isn't high grade.
I think with 2 of the 3 of us here coming from a sort of banking background as well, I think we should flag it's always important to take equity research reports with the pinch of salt and do your own research as well and sort of put it in perspective and obviously assess any conflicts of interest out there. But yeah, they're obviously estimates for something that hasn't even come out yet, so we'll sort of see how that plays out on the resource front.
I can add a little bit of commentary there. I mean, by all accounts, this is a substantial discovery. Yeah, I mean, we don't get, even if that's not true, it's still pretty amazing results, right? So by all accounts, it's a substantial discovery. But I think what the three of us collectively take issue with here is what appears to be very pumpermental marketing coming from the company. And that's, take example, that quote from the CEO, the fact that we don't get cross sections, and thirdly, the fact that we get plenty of photos of drill core in every announcement instead. So that sort of market behavior is not indicative of a company with a market cap of $1.6 billion. And AFR's rumoured that there's been several global mining majors that have taken an interest in this asset. Rightfully so. These hits are great, right? Let me tell you, like, whenever the BD teams of those companies take a look at this sort of market behaviour, that is a massive red flag to them.
And didn't you say, Trav, you can actually download the drill data in a file and extrapolate that into a cross section?
Look, they do have a zip download on their website if you want to do the work and bring up everything and leapfrog yourself. It's a fair bit of work. It's not that hard to just put some cross sections in your ASX announcements.
Yeah, and I just see this as it's definitely a risk to flag for this mineral resource estimate based on the fact that no cross sections have been provided. This mineral resource estimate just might not come back as good as everyone thinks. Who knows? But it's definitely a risk. So it'll be definitely one to watch when this first initial resource estimate comes out. So,
100%. We're going to keep covering this. I think it's a super interesting project.
Well, this is, as you said, we haven't done ourselves any favours. We're sort of committed to doing this every day, and we haven't scheduled many days off. So we haven't even done a 5-day week yet because I had public holidays. So
just don't say that.
Next week's going to be a bloody ripper. So, no, good stuff, lads. Good recap. I think that's enough on Patriot.